Subscribe to LearnCap and hit the bell icon to get notified.
Hello friends, welcome back to our journey towards Foreign Exchange Management Act. Today in this lecture we are going to study about overseas direct investment. What is overseas direct investment? When does a company do an overseas investment? Why it is required? What is the limit? And in case of any other entity, let's say proprietorship or partnership firm, how do an overseas direct investment is done? So now let us start on it. Why exactly an overseas direct investment is required? Overseas direct investment in a joint venture or a wholly owned subsidiary is required. It acts as an important avenue for promoting the growth of the Indian company between the Indian entrepreneurs. It also acts as a medium of economic and business cooperation between India and the other countries. So this is how an overseas direct investment is important. What is an ODI? So we know why it is important. Now let us see what is an overseas direct investment. So overseas direct investment means. So first let me say you that towards this presentation, the overseas direct investment word, I will be using it as an ODI. So please do note that. So what is a direct investment? How does a company do? So overseas direct investment means any investment outside India by way of a contribution towards equity, towards subscription to the MOA of the equity shares, and also the purchase of the existing shares of a foreign entity. By these three ways, it is said to be an overseas direct investment which person can do outside India. But however, it does not include portfolio investment. So this is what it is: by way of a capital, subscription to MOA and purchase of an existing shares. But however, portfolio investment is not included here. So now let us see the next definition, which is financial commitment. What does financial commitment means? Financial commitment here means the amount of direct investment by way of a contribution towards equity, towards loan, towards 100% of the amount of the guarantee, and towards the 50% of the amount of the performance guarantee. So this is said to be a financial commitment. When a person it wants to do an overseas investment outside India, then it can do it where the financial commitment, it is a limit which is being given to a particular entity. Within that limit, a particular entity can invest outside India, which can include your equity, loan, 50% of the performance guarantee, and 100% of the amount of the guarantee. All clubbed together should not exceed 400% of the net worth. So this is said to be a financial commitment. So now let us see what are the types of route for making an ODI. So the first one is the automatic route and another is the approval route. What happens under automatic route? Under automatic route, no prior approval of RBI is required. An Indian entity can remit the funds outside India easily under the automatic route. However, there are two conditions which needs to be complied. One is the 400% of the net worth. So up to 400% of the net worth, an Indian entity can send the money outside India for making an ODI. How is this net worth calculated? Net worth should be based on the latest audited financials, and it includes your equity shares, preference shares, and also the reserves and surplus. So including all these things, the net worth is being calculated and it should not exceed 400% of the net worth. This is one of the conditions. Also, there is one more condition which says up to 1 million USD you can remit outside India. There are two conditions. Once these two conditions are satisfied by an Indian entity or an Indian party can send the money outside India under the automatic route. However, under approval route, prior approval of RBI is required. So Indian party has to approach RBI, take the prior approval for doing an investment, and once RBI approves this, only then an investment can be done outside India. Now we are going to study about automatic route and approval route in a different way. First, let us see how automatic route works, what are the proposals, how it is to be made, and then about the approval route. Now let us see how to do the investment outside India by way of an automatic route. First, let us study about automatic and then we will come back to the approval route. So the proposal for making an ODI under automatic route. Under automatic route, what happens? So there is no approval required. As I said you earlier, no approval is required. An entity, they can approach their AD category 1 bank, who is an AD category 1 bank, which will be studying in a different chapter. So they can approach their bank and with the form ODI, which is being prescribed by RBI, the entity needs to fill that form, and with that form they need to approach the bank, and the bankers will take that form with the other supporting documents, enclosures and documents of making such investments. So they will take those documents, they'll scrutinize it, and once the scrutiny is done, the supporting documents will be submitted to RBI for further scrutiny. So once the RBI gets those documents, what it does? Once the RBI gets those documents, the RBI will scrutinize those documents, and the AD banker, it will submit the documents through form ODI, will be submitted through online. Once it is submitted through online, RBI will scrutinize it, and a UIN number will be generated, which is called as a unique identification number. This unique identification number is given to a particular overseas entity. Let's say here 4 people are investing. A, B and C are the resident in India. They want to invest in, let's say, XYZ company. So all the 4 people, they have to approach a particular authorized dealer bank. Let's say HDFC is in our case. So they need to approach HDFC, and once they approach HDFC, all the documents are scrutinized and it is being handed over to RBI. RBI will generate an UIN number, which is called as a unique identification number, and this unique identification number is only for an XYZ company which is outside India, and it will be allotted to all the 3 people here in our example. So all the 3 residents will get a particular unique identification number. This is all about the procedure of an ODI under automatic route. Now let us see how to do an ODI under approval route. So under approval route, how do we do an ODI? So it's the same way. The form ODI has to be submitted to the authorized dealer bank, but however, here there are some additional documents which the entity has to submit. Section D and E of the ODI form: IP addresses, Indian party address to the authorized dealer, board resolution needs to be submitted, and a diagrammatic representation of the organization structure. With all these documents, along with this, one more document is required, which is called as valuation certificate of the organization. A valuation certificate is to be done by it. Only a chartered accountant and a CPA has to do the valuation, and once a valuation is done, along with the other documents which have the list prescribed here, has to be submitted to the authorized dealer bank. Then what does authorized dealer bank do? They will scrutinize the document and they'll hand over it to RBI. RBI in this case will scrutinize all the documents in a very detailed manner. After detailed manner, it will see that whether an approval is really required to be given or not. So if RBI feels that yes, approval is given, then with the unique identification number. So this is all about in case of an approval case. Now let us see the transactions that require approval. What all transactions require approval? So we know that there is an automatic route. Under automatic route, any entity can go and just approach the AD banker, get the UIN number and do the overseas direct investment. But how about in case of an approval route? The first thing here is the energy and natural resource sector. In case of an overseas company which is under energy and natural resource sector and it is exceeding the limit which is being prescribed, that is the 400%, if it is exceeding it, then the approval of RBI is required. And how to approach, I have already explained you in the previous slide. So the manner in which it is being prescribed, the entity has to approach the RBI. So the next one is unincorporated entities. The entities which are not incorporated in the oil sector by the resident corporates, again which is exceeding the prescribed limit, then they need to approach RBI for this also. The third one is the proprietorship and unregistered partnership firm. So here the proprietorship and unregistered partnership, in case of a registered partnership, it's under the approval route. A partnership can go and approach the authorized dealer bank. But in case of an unregistered partnership firm and proprietorship firm, if they need to do an overseas direct investment, then they need to approach RBI, and there are also certain conditions which have been specified, and those conditions we will look into the further slides. The next point which requires the RBI approval is the investment by registered trust societies engaged in manufacturing, educational, hospital sectors. So in case of a trust which is registered, societies who are engaged in a manufacturing, hospital end sector, they would require prior approval of RBI. So we have seen now let us see the fifth one, who all require. The next one is the corporate guarantee by an Indian party. If the Indian party wants to give a corporate guarantee to the subsequent second level or for the step down subsidiary, then a prior approval of RBI is required in this case. Next is the restructuring of a balance sheet of a joint venture or a wholly owned subsidiary. In case the joint venture or a wholly owned subsidiary which is outside India and you want to restructure the balance sheet by way of a write-off or any receivables, then prior approval of RBI is again required in these cases. Next is the capitalization of an export proceeds. So in case of a capitalization of an export proceeds, in our export chapter, we would have studied that the exports have to be realized within 9 months from the date the export is being made. But in case, let's say that you are not able to realize those export proceeds within the 9 months, then what you can do? Then the exports can be capitalized, but it can be capitalized only to the period of 9 months. Beyond 9 months, a prior approval of RBI is required again. Next is the Indian party undertaking financial commitment without equity contribution. So if without any equity contribution and you want to do a financial commitment, then again a prior approval of RBI would be required. So all these cases, approval of RBI is required. So now let us study what is financial commitment in a more detailed way. Financial commitment is an amount of direct investment outside India by an Indian party. It is an investment outside India by an Indian party which involves contribution to equity shares or CCPS. So equity shares, CCPS is being included, which I had already explained you in the previous slides. Then the contribution on the preference shares. It is termed as a loan only for the case of the reporting purposes. Otherwise, this is also being considered as a part of a financial commitment. So we have equity, we have CCPS shares, then 100% of the preference shares, and the next one is the loan. The loan which is being considered is also a part of the financial commitment. The next is the 100% of the amount of the corporate guarantee and bank guarantee and letter of credit which is issued by the resident bank. So any bank guarantee or a letter of credit which is given by a resident bank on behalf of an Indian party to the overseas company is also a part of a financial commitment. So we have here equity shares, we have CCPS, we have loan, corporate guarantee, and then bank guarantee or letter of credit. All this will act as a part of a financial commitment, including fund and non-fund based credit facility. Including all these things, it will act as a part of the financial commitment. So when a financial commitment is being calculated, all these things are need to be taken care by a entity. So now let us see what is next. Next is what is the eligibility to make an ODI under automatic route. So what are the eligibility purposes for making an ODI? We have studied what is ODI, what is financial commitment, what is automatic route, approval route, how to do or what is the procedure under the automatic route, and what is the procedure under approval route, how under approval route what all entities are required approval. Now let us see the eligibility for making an ODI under the automatic route. In eligibility for Indian party, okay, it includes who all can do it. Company which is incorporated in India, and the next is the body which is created under an act of parliament. Any of the body which is created under the act of the parliament are allowed to do an ODI under the automatic route. The partnership firm which are registered, remember I just spoke before that any partnership firm or a proprietorship firm, in case of a partnership firm which is unregistered, only then prior approval of RBI is required. Otherwise, a registered partnership firm can do an ODI under automatic route which is coming from here. The next one is the limited partnership firm. So LLPs are also allowed to do ODI, which was recently somewhere around 1.5 years back was being allowed, where around LLPs were also allowed to do the ODI under automatic route. The LLP is registered under the LLP Act, or any other Indian entity which is notified by RBI. If any other entity which is notified by RBI, then they are also allowed to do ODI under the automatic route. Now, what are the permissible sources of funding of ODI? So, if you want to make an ODI, how do you fund that, or which money can an ODI be done? So, it can be done out of the drawal of the foreign exchange from an AD bank. So, you have a current account, an entity is having a current account and they want to do an investment outside India, then money which is held in the bank account or the current account, a drawal of foreign exchange is possible from an AD bank in India. The next one is out of swap of shares. So out of swap of shares also, let's say it's allowed, that is one entity giving the shares to the another entity and another entity getting the shares from there. So there's a swap. I give you my company shares and you give me your company shares. So these are known as swap of shares, and with this also ODI is permitted. However, the procedure would remain the same. Next is the capitalization of the exports and other dues and entitlements. So in case of a capitalization of exports, as I said you earlier, in case of an export up to 9 months, if you want to capitalize your export proceeds, it is possible, but beyond 9 months, if it is required, then prior approval of RBI is required. Otherwise, ODI is permissible. It is one of the source of doing an ODI. Next is proceeds of ECB. So in case of an ECB, what is an ECB? ECB is known as external commercial borrowing. So more detail of ECB you will be studying in your next few chapters. Just to explain you, when a company is taking an ECB from a person or an entity outside India and then it wants to issue the shares against that, then that is also permissible and it is also one of the sourcing of funding of ODI. The fifth one is exchange of ADRs and GDRs. So we have already studied in a different chapter what is ADR, GDR. So if you want to exchange the shares for ADRs and GDRs, that is also permissible and it is also a source of funding. That is the fifth one. Now sixth one, let us see what it is. The balance held in your EEFC account. Let's say you have an EEFC account. So what is exactly EEFC account? Is an account, it is maintained in foreign currency and it is not converted into INR. All your foreign exchange receivables will be held in that EEFC account, and out of that EEFC account you can remit the funds outside India for making the ODI. So this was about the 6th point. Now the 7th one is proceeds of foreign currency funds received through ADRs and GDRs what is issued. So whatever ADRs and GDRs which are being issued, the proceeds out of it can be in the form of an ODI. So friends, we have studied here what is ODI, what is the definition of an overseas direct investment, what is financial commitment, and under automatic route, approval route, what is allowed, what is not allowed, which all sectors are being allowed, and also we have studied what is the procedure and sources of funding of an ODI. So this is all about the summary of an ODI. Now further, how each entity can do an ODI either under approval or automatic route, we will see it in the next few slides in my next session. Now let us see, in case of an entities who want to do an ODI, how do they do it? So in case of an ODI by a proprietorship concern or an unregistered partnership firm, so if you remember, this comes under the approval route. So in case of a proprietorship concern or an unregistered partnership firm, if they want to do an ODI, then a prior approval of RBI is required. So in the proposal for ODI, what all is to be considered, we will see here. So earlier I had told you that there are some conditions under which an proprietorship concern, unregistered partnership firm, they can approach RBI. So what are those conditions we are going to study here? So the entity should be classified as a status holder under foreign trade policy. So here the first point, it says that a proprietorship concern or an unregistered partnership firm, it has to be classified as a status holder under the foreign trade policy. Only then a person will be able to do an ODI. So the second one is, it should be having a proven track record. So what does proven track record means? A proven track record means the exports of that particular entity does not exceed 10% of the average exports realization of the preceding 3 years. So preceding 3 years, 10% of this average exports you need to take it, and it should not exceed to that extent. That is known as a proven track record. If it does not exceed, only then RBI may or may not give an approval for doing an overseas investment by a proprietorship concern and a partnership, unregistered partnership firm. So I'll be very clear here that it is an unregistered partnership firm. So it should have a proven track record. So here it means that if you want to send a foreign exchange outside India, then you should have first earned those foreign exchange. Only then it is possible to do an ODI. So the next third point is AD banker should be satisfied with the KYC. So AD banker will scrutinize the documents when you're doing an ODI, and if it is satisfied with the proceeds of the KYC and your business, what is the nature of the business, and then ODI, if it is satisfied, then the ODI will be allowed. Otherwise it will not be allowed. There has to be no adverse notice. So here it means that a proprietorship concern or a partnership which is an unregistered partnership firm, it should not have got any adverse notice by any of the Directorate of Enforcement or by an income tax notice which has an adverse effect. If it is not got, only then it is being allowed this transaction, otherwise it is not allowed. The next point is the proposed investment. How much can you remit outside India? Let's say you have a proprietorship concern or an unregistered partnership firm, then how much can you remit outside India? So the remittance is being to a limit which will not exceed 10% of the average of the last 3 years export realization. So your average of the last 3 years export realization, or 200% of the net owned fund, whichever is less. So here we need to keep in mind whichever is less. So whichever is less is important. So either 10% of the average of the last 3 years of the export proceeds which are realized, or 200% of the net owned fund is being allowed. Whereas in case of an Indian party, or let's say an approval route, how much is allowed? What did we study? Yes, it is 400% of the net worth. So 400% of the net worth, which is calculated as per the last audited balance sheet, is being allowed or permitted. But here, in case of a proprietorship concern or a partnership, unregistered partnership firm, the limit is being withhold limit, or let's say the limit is not exceeding, it should not exceed any of these two. Only then it is an allowed transaction. So considering all these things, RBI will consider, and it will see that whether an ODI can be permitted for a proprietorship concern or an unregistered partnership firm. So this is all about proprietorship concern and unregistered partnership firm. The next entity who can do an ODI is the registered trust and a society. In case of a registered trust and society, also there are some conditions which needs to be complied with. Only then they will be allowed to do an ODI. So here the eligibility criteria, let us study the eligibility criteria. The first point is it has to be a registered trust. Only when it is a registered trust, RBI will consider the case, otherwise RBI is not going to consider the case. Or let's say in case of societies, in case of a societies, it has to be a registered society which is registered under the Society Act, and in case of a trust, it has to be registered under Indian Trust Act. Only then it is allowed. The next one is trust deed. So in case of a trust, we have a trust deed, right? So trust deed will specify what are the objects of the trust. So the investment which is being made by the trust, it has to be specified in the trust deed. So the trust deed has to state that the investment can be run by the trust. Only then RBI will consider this case. And in case of societies, it's considered as an MOA. The MOA has to permit it. The next one is bank has to be satisfied with the KYC. So KYC is always an important element, or the important document or element we can say, which has to be satisfied. Let's say it's an FDI transaction or an ODI transaction, or let's say any of the transactions under the FEMA, the KYC has to be complied with. If KYC is not complied, then our AD banker will not at all allow your transaction, nor even RBI. So first AD will scrutinize the documents, and only then it is given to RBI. If the entity does not satisfy the KYC compliant, then the documents are rejected upfront. So the next fourth one is approved by the trustees. Any for example, in case of a company, let's say any transaction which is done by a company, it has to be approved by the board, right? Then same way, in case of a trust, any transaction which is there, it has to be approved by the trustees. So these are the first 4 points. Now let us see what is next. So the fifth one is it has to be in existence for the last 3 years. This is a very important one. So here it says that a trust has to be in existence for the last 3 years. Let's say if the trust is not in existence for the last 3 years, then ODI is not at all permitted. This is a must transaction, otherwise it is not. There should not be any adverse activity. The next one is the adverse activity. So adverse in the sense there has to be no wrong or willful activity which is being done. So we have seen point number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and now let's see the 7th one, which is MOA should permit, which I already told you in my previous slide, telling that the society, in case of a society, the OA should permit. Only then a society will be eligible to do an overseas direct investment. So MOA should permit in case of a society. Now let us see what happens in case a trust or a society which is being engaged in a manufacturing sector, or let's say in case of an educational sector or a hospitality sector. In all these sectors, if the trust or a society is engaged, then what is going to be? Then in that investment, trust or a society can make an investment only in the same sector in the joint venture or a wholly owned subsidiary who are engaged in these same sectors. They need to be engaged, and approval of RBI is required. A prior approval of RBI is required. So to summarize this slide is, let's say you have a trust and a society, or you have both, any of them, and you are under either a manufacturing sector, or you are under an educational sector, or you are under a hospitality sector, and you want to remit the funds or make an overseas direct investment outside India in any of these sectors who are there, and the overseas entity is also under the same sector, then in that case, and prior approval of RBI is required. Only with the approval of RBI this would be allowed, otherwise it is not an allowed transaction. Now, in case of an acquisition or sale of a foreign security by a resident individual, we have studied about the entities, company, what happens in case of a proprietorship concern, unregistered partnership firm, then a registered trust, a registered society. Now, in case of a resident individual, what happens? In case of a resident individual, can acquire the any of the shares or equity shares outside India, or can do an overseas direct investment outside India without prior approval in case of the following cases. In following cases, the resident individual can make an overseas direct investment outside India without prior approval. So the first one is as a gift. If a resident individual, he wants to give a gift outside India, then that is an allowed transaction and it is possible. So let's say a gift is in the form of shares, and let's say you are a resident individual and you want to give a gift of equity shares or any to a resident outside India, then that is permissible. It is a permissible transaction. The next is ESOP. ESOP, let's say a company which is incorporated outside India wants to give an ESOP to the employees of an Indian company under the cashless ESOP. It is a permissible transaction, and a resident individual, he can get that ESOPs. So in these two, both, what are we seeing it? In these both, the first and the second point, there is no remittance outside India. There is no cash flow outside India. You're getting a cashless ESOP. That means you need not remit any money outside, and you're getting a gift, or you're giving a gift, so you need not remit any funds outside. So it is an allowed and permissible transaction. There is no exchange or foreign exchange flow which is happening. Next is by way of inheritance. This is also a permissible transaction, since a gift, inheritance, all these are permissible. Next is again an ESOP issued by an employee director of an Indian office, branch or subsidiary. So before slide we had seen the ESOP under cashless. Now here it is a normal ESOPs which are being given to the employee or director of an Indian company or a branch or a subsidiary which is in India, and later when the ESOPs are vested, the nominal price, or let's say the exercise price, to that extent the funds are remitted outside India and the shares are being got by the employees or the director. So under this also, this is also one of the way under which a resident individual, he can get the foreign securities. The next one is either by way of a bonus or right issue. So a bonus or a right issue, a foreign employee, you have got the shares of you have made the overseas direct investment under equity shares of, let's say, XYZ company which is outside India, and this XYZ company gives you now the bonus. This is also permissible and no RBI approval is required, or in case of a right shares also, it is a permissible transaction. The next and the last but not the least is the purchase of foreign security out of the funds of the RFC account. So RFC account, we have already studied what is resident foreign currency account. So under this resident foreign currency account, if someone wants to buy the shares outside India, a resident individual, he can use the foreign exchange which is under this resident foreign currency account, and he can get the shares or make an ODI outside India. Now the next one, let us see acquisition of shares of a foreign company in a director's capacity by a resident individual. Now here this point is, and resident individual in India, he wants to be a director in that particular XYZ company. Then what happens? Can he become a director? And upon being a director, will he get the shares, or how can he acquire the shares on being a director? So a general permission is being given by RBI where a minimum amount of shares or a minimum number of shares which are said to be a qualification shares are required, which is said to be a qualification shares can be obtained by the resident individual to be a director in that particular company. So to summarize this slide is, let's say I want to be a director in an XYZ company which is outside India, and I want to hold the directorship in that company, but the laws of that host country requires that I should hold a minimum number of shares. Let's say 1 share I need to hold to be a director of that company. So those kind of shares are said to be a qualification shares, and I can make an overseas direct investment to get that qualification shares to be a director of that XYZ company. So this is also, in one of the chapter we have studied, that is the current account and capital account transaction. The same qualification of shares was being explained. So hope you all are clear with this slide. So now let us go to the next slide, where it says Indian mutual funds for investment abroad. So in case we have seen what is Indian companies, how do they want to invest, resident individuals if they want to invest, then a proprietorship concern, unregistered partnership firms, LLPs, we have seen registered trust, registered societies. Now let us see mutual funds. In case of an Indian mutual funds, and if they want to invest abroad, how they can do it. So Indian mutual funds, they have to be registered with SEBI. Only if they are registered with SEBI, they are being permitted to do an overseas direct investment which is abroad. And what is the overall cap they should have? The overall cap is $7 billion. So up to $7 billion is allowed. So within the overall cap, an investment can be done by a mutual funds abroad. It can be in the form of ADRs and GDRs of the Indian and the foreign companies. You can do it. The next is the entity of overseas companies listed on the overseas stock exchange. Indian mutual funds can invest outside India in the overseas companies which are listed on the overseas stock exchange. The third one is the foreign debt instrument securities. So they can even invest in the foreign debt instruments or securities. That is also permissible in a money market instruments. The fourth point is the money market instrument. Let's say mutual fund wants to invest in a money market investments, then that is also a permissible transaction. Under government securities, if they want to invest abroad by way of government securities, that is also a permissible, provided the overall limit of $7 billion is being complied with. Next is, we have seen now all about ODI. When you want to do ODI, what a company or an entity have to do. Now, once an ODI is done by an entity, then what are the compliances, post ODI compliances? What are the compliances which an individual, or let's say which an entity, have to comply once an ODI is done? So once you do an ODI, a UIN number, let's say UIN number, that is unique identification number, is been allotted to the company. So you keep doing the transactions, but once an equity, or you have done an ODI in an equity or by way of a loan, post ODI compliances, what a company have to do, let us see that. So the post ODI compliances, okay, are, which an Indian party has to do, is the share certificate. The law says that in case an Indian party, so Indian party here includes company, LLP, registered partnership firm who are allowed to do an ODI under automatic route. They have to, once an ODI is done, they have to give the share certificate to the AD banker within the 6 months from the date of the remittance. Let's say I have done a remittance today, and within the 6 months I am obliged to give the share certificate to the AD banker for getting these shares. If the share certificate are not being provided to the AD banker, then it will be a non-compliances. The next one is repatriation of all the dues to India. So I have a subsidiary, wholly owned subsidiary outside India, and I keep doing exports outside India. So the realization of those export proceeds or repatriation of the dividends, interest if loan is given, all these have to be repatriated to India within 60 days from the day it has become accrued. Within 60 days you need to repatriate all the funds to India. If the same is not done, then that will be a non-compliances. Then filing of APRs. APR is actually an annual performance report which needs to be filed with under the part 3 of the ODI form to the AD banker every year within 31st of the December. So 31st of December is the due date, but for your exam purpose it is 30th June you need to comply with. So within the due date the APR has to be filed. APR is all about the details of the overseas company, what is the profits of the company, what is the repatriation which is done to India, and the same has to be certified by a chartered accountant or a statutory auditor, and not only a simple chartered accountant, the statutory auditor has to certify the APR. Next is report of the decisions which are taken by a joint venture or a wholly owned subsidiary. So any decisions which have been taken by a joint venture or a wholly owned subsidiary, for example, let's say that the board members of the foreign company are changed, or the investment what you have done, the shareholding percentage are being changed, or there are few more shareholders which have been coming into the overseas company, they have invested in your overseas company, and because of that the shareholding has changed. Any change which is there, it has to be reported to AD banker within 30 days of the such change which has been taken place, and the form which is under the form known as section B. Under section B the details have to be provided and it has to be reported to the AD banker. The next one is disinvestment. So disinvestment, let's say you have done an ODI, you have done all the compliances, but now you transfer the shares to another person, or by way of a liquidation or any amalgamation or merger has taken place of the overseas company, then you disinvest from that company. In such cases the reporting has to be done to the AD banker. The disinvestment you need to report it, and the sale proceeds on that shares whatever are there, it has to be repatriated to India not later than within 90 days. So not later than within 90 days you need to repatriate all the funds to India. So this is all about post compliances. What you need to do is, once the ODI is done, post compliances relates to the share certificates, APR filing, that is every year you keep on updating the overseas records in the books of the AD bankers, stating what is the profits, what is the realization or the repatriation to India, and that needs to be certified by a statutory auditor. And then later, in case you're disinvesting, you need to file a form with AD banker telling that there is a disinvestment which has taken place and the sale proceeds are being realized within 90 days of that disinvestment. So this is all about ODI. We have seen very detailed from each and everything, very detailed and minutely, what is ODI, how it is done, what is financial commitment, what is the limit, In case of a different entities, how they can invest outside India, what are the limitations which are required, and in case of a resident individual, how he can invest outside India, and what are the post compliances of ODI. So keep studying this, and in case of any questions, please do let me know. Thank you all for listening this.
Subscribe to LearnCap and hit the bell icon to get notified.